Cool. I think we are going to start. So first of all, welcome and good morning. It's great to be here speaking at the IoT Architecture Conference. My name is Alfred Lui, in case you're in the wrong room. My name is Alfred Lui. I design services and user experiences for consumer products, and more specifically, connected products. I'm currently the Chief Design Officer of a new startup in San Francisco called Imbue. We used to be called Seer Labs, but we recently rebranded in preparation for launch. So in this talk, which will last about 35 minutes or so, I want to share with you some of the things that I've learned while I've worked in the Internet of Things and the connected product in the past 4 years. I have been working on Internet of Things since about 2010, and I'm also the founder and the organizer of the San Francisco Internet of Things Meetup, and with monthly events, so if you're interested, come on by and I'll tell you a little bit more about it afterwards. So I started designing user experiences for mobile, actually, not Internet of Things. I started my career in mobile back in 2004. And at that time, I joked with my friends and family that I drew rectangles all day. And it was true. I drew a lot of rectangles, and I did that for about 5 straight years. In 2010, I moved to London. And I moved to London to join a digital consultancy called Fuelband, to become a digital service designer. On the first day when I started my job, I noticed that thing that is on the far right edge of this presentation, sitting on my desk. And some of you may notice this thing is called a Navistar, and it came into the market in late 90s. It's kind of like a half radio, half toy thing, and it makes a sound and it speaks to you when you get a message or when it gets updates on the weather over Wi-Fi. I couldn't quite figure out what it was for a long time, and even though it was there on my desk from day one, I was in that office for a good year and a half, but I never quite paid attention to it. In retrospect, I think one of the reasons why I never paid attention to this thing that has now become part of my career at that time is that it's not a rectangle. There are buttons and there are lights on it, but because of my background as a mobile user experience designer, none of that actually remind me of what I need to work with it, so I actually never pay attention to it. So, ironically, fast forward 4 years, these non-rectangle objects have started to multiply, and ironically, like rabbits. And digital designers like myself is spending more and more time on these devices of different shapes and sizes and designing user experiences for them. These devices are also coming into our environment, starting to scan onto our body, and coming to our home and cars. They are becoming the new computers. What I have, and along with many of you since you're here, what we have been witnessing is what is now is the beginning of what is called the Internet of Things. So what's happening? Why are we seeing all these devices in the market? And for people like us, designers, developers, product managers, system architects, who have been designing for neatly shaped rectangles, how should we look at this new world? These are some of the questions that I want to shed some light on in this talk. I originally made this talk strictly for designers, actually for South by Southwest this year. But I believe a lot of the insights and a lot of the lessons that I've learned actually apply to disciplines that work with designers as well. So, no talk about a developing topic is complete without definition. So here's mine. So what is the Internet of Things? In essence, the Internet of Things is the physical extension of the Internet that we have been building for the past 2 decades. The Internet of Things is made up with objects that are uniquely identifiable, interoperable, and perhaps most importantly, they're connected to each other through the cloud, through services in the cloud. And why is the Internet of Things happening now of all times? Well, there are actually three reasons. First, CPUs have dropped in sizes and prices that would now allow them to be embedded to just about anything. They have also become much more power efficient. Wireless data has now covers most of the populated and developed areas. And third, cloud services and APIs allow these cheap computers to connect to content and talk to each other. With these things, now, and with what that allows us to do is to allow us to embed sensors and the computers into environment. It now doesn't make it only possible, but it's also economical for smaller companies and individuals like us. In 2008, the number of sensors distributed in the world, including phones, sensors that track packages, and sensors that tracks health of cattle. The number has surpassed the number of human beings on this planet in 2008. And it is estimated that in 2015, that number is going to reach 25 billion, double from 2012, just 2 years ago. But numbers are numbers, right? But opportunities is not in the numbers, as you probably know. The opportunities lies in the permutations of the solutions that companies and individuals now can mix and match with these little computers in their home and in the environment and in the body. The generic computers are disappearing, but now what is coming in to replace it are these solutions that everyone can pick off the shelf and make it their own. So what does it mean? So what does it all mean? So small computers everywhere, data, what does it all mean? Well, I think right now it's a little bit actually confusing based on my working in the field and also connecting to companies that are making the Internet of Things and these devices. It's quite confusing for companies because there is no platform. There's at least not yet. This year, I think big companies are starting to angle themselves in to establish themselves, but there's no established platform just yet. And for designers especially, who are in the crowd, there's no style guide. There's no template. You cannot just pick something off and work from there. It's simply too early and too chaotic in the field. But within this chaos, there's a little bit of order. And I want to share with you 4 things that has come up over and over and over again as I see this new field develop in the past 4 years. First, I want to talk about attention. In 1990s, when you hear the sound, someone's about to go by. Specifically, one person in the house is about to spend a few hours in front of the screen, surfing the web, chatting on the iOS, like now on BBS. Today, however, if someone is about to go online, you're not going to hear this sound anymore. You'll hear this sound instead. And that person is no longer going to spend hours in front of the screen. He may spend a minute or 2, and he's not only going to do one thing. He's going to switch from replying to email, checking his Facebook post, and liking an Instagram photo that his friend posts. I recently led a research for my new company. My company works particularly on notifications and user attention. And recently we did a research with about 80 people, specifically about this topic. We found that people get interrupted up to 80 times a day with these notifications, with just one device. As the number of devices in your environment multiply, you can start to imagine how it's going to be like. And here's the reality. And here's the reality that I think as a designer I confront myself and the people that I work with every day. Today we all design for the foreground. We assume that we have the full attention of the people who we design for. And that is not true. And if you think about how the devices are multiplying, going back to the slides I showed you before, and part of the pun that this doesn't compute if you're putting a design into an environment that is going to be shared by multiple devices. As the number of devices multiply, people are starting to experience fatigue because of all the information that is flooding into the environment. and all they are going to be drowned by signals. So before I go into the solution, let's break it down a little bit about how we design today. Today, when it comes to designing for users' attentions, today there are only two methods. It all really comes down to these two things. One is push. If a designer believes that, or a system believes that I don't have your attention, I will push something to you. Think about the notification sound that you just heard. Think about the ticket tapes that mysteriously just run across your TV screen. Those are the things that the content provider and the designers want to push into your consciousness to grab your attention because it believes your mind is somewhere else. And we also do pull. We pull when we believe we have your full attention and we want to keep baiting you to keep going non-stop and stay there and stay where we want you to be. Think about Pinterest. It reloads at the bottom of the screen because it wants you to load again and load again. And the same thing with YouTube. But if we can be embedded into their environment and if we can be on all the time, a new option opens up. And that option is called ambient information. First, what it means is you can create glanceable information in the ambient and display a very small piece of information that is complete without asking people to stop what they're doing. And further, if you're always in the environment, you can also sense. You can actually detect where the user is and scale the user experience based on how much interest I express to you. This kind of paradigm has never been available to us before, but they are now coming into our tool set. Two of my favorite examples of ambient information came from the same company called Ambient Devices from Massachusetts. In US, you may or may not know if you are driving a hybrid car, you probably know it better than I do. In the United States, electricity prices fluctuate. It fluctuates throughout the day. This device from Ambient Devices is called Energy Joule. It tells you how much electricity costs currently using the screen that's on the right-hand side. That by itself pretty okay, It's embedded in the environment, gives you real-time information, pretty useful. But the real elegance of this device is the light at the back. The light turns red when the electricity reaches the peak period. With those two things combined together, this device can actually tell you about electricity cost from across the room. You can be making your breakfast and you can still know whether the electricity is now hitting the peak. It delivers a very complete piece of information to you with very low amount of attention that it demands. And if I want to know more about how much electricity prices, I can just walk over and look at the screen. This kind of high information value and attention ratio solution assumes that people's attention is absent. And that's something that I have found over and over again in elegant IoT solutions to really adhere to. You assume that people are not paying attention to you at that moment. And it delivers one piece of information and let the user decide what to do. It doesn't push, it doesn't pull. It just delivers the information at the right time, assuming that your mind is somewhere else, but you happen to catch it. If you want to do something with it, come over. To get an even more tangible idea about the possibility of ambient information and scaling for attention, check out this concept demo done by David Rose, at that time the CEO of Ambient Devices. And he did it actually 5 years ago in Europe in a conference called Lift. The slides will be up in SlideShare, and you can check out the video. So it was never deployed, but it was a prototype that displays, think of it as a tablet. It displays the weather, and it's very subtle information about the weather in the background. And that's all it does. But it has a proximity sensor. And if you walk closer to it, it actually shows you the 2 days forecast because you expressed interest. And if you tap on it, it gives you a 7 days forecast. So not only does it scale the user experience based on users' interest and attention, what it does, if you pay attention and think a little bit more, it took away the need to navigate altogether. Just by walking around it, just by leaning towards it, it shows you more information as you express your interest to it. The big takeaway here is that attention is already rare today, and it's going to be even more rare as these connected products starting to jam into our environment. Some of them may be yours, some of them may be others. And to be smart about this trend, I believe we should look into creating user experiences that has this high information value and attention ratio. And by taking advantage of the fact that we are in the environment all the time, and we are connected all the time, and we can be sensing all the time. And we should deliver information that is small, complete, and that doesn't demand a lot of people's attention. And also, if you can tell where people are and what they're doing, you can actually scale the amount of information that you deliver and scale your user experience with it. Next, I want to talk a little bit about data and how products should start working with data as IoT products. Not every IoT product will collect data, but from what I've seen, most of them will. So a bit of a story to share. In June this year, I backed a Kickstarter project. Actually, June last year, I backed a Kickstarter project called Smart Citizen Monitor. Has anybody of you seen this one? Okay. So it was a $100 device, and it delivers it like this, and you have to put it together, but it wasn't too bad. It tracks temperature, humidity, light level, noise level, CO2 level, nitrogen level, and the number of Wi-Fi networks in your proximity. In other words, it listens a lot, but it does nothing. Now I'm amongst hundreds of these backers who are waiting for real use of our little data generating machine. And so far I have found none. But I did learn one thing though. And I think knowing this in your project and in your view of the IoT is going to save you a lot of time and a lot of money. Data without interpretation is just quantified noise. More and more devices will have sensors inside, more and more devices will have connectivity, more and more devices will be able to blast data. But without any kind of interpretation, just generating data is not enough. Here's a second example about designing with data. I have this within Wi-Fi scale, or smart body analyzer, as the marketing team likes to call it. It measures my weight, my BMI, my heart rate, which are all related to my body. But curiously, it also measures my temperature and my CO2 level every 10 minutes in my room. So air quality has really nothing to do with my health. I didn't buy it to track air quality, but the data is available. But the story never quite matched up. So one afternoon I got really curious and I decided to go online and try to find out what's going on. And online on their product page, actually on the help page, and behind a very small icon, it says that the high CO2 level may deteriorate my sleep quality and may cause headaches. Now I don't know about you, but I generally get headaches when I'm stressed and when I'm ill. Not because when the CO2 level is very high. And even if I got headaches, I wouldn't think about going into my room and check my scale and check the CO2 level. I think without a real connection between data and the product story, and that additional data, just because you have it, just because you want to include it, just because it's available, actually makes the product story weaker. Today, when I talk to designers and product managers about data, the conversation automatically leans onto data visualization. And data visualization is cool. I'm a 100% geek on data visualization as well. But data is never an end. It's always a mean. And just because we can make data beautiful doesn't mean that people are going to keep coming back to a solution day after day. The reality is that no one wake up one day and look for data. No one do. I don't. And most of the people I talk to, they tell me that they don't either. Most of the successful solutions out there, I believe, they consistently do two things. Instead of trying to just make data available, instead of just trying to visualize data, they do these two things. One, they help people make sense of the data, going back to interpretation. And two, it connects data to a human story that people can relate to, going back to the product story that I told you about. And ultimately, successful IoT products, when they design with data, combine the meaning of data and the human experience from the story to enable people to gain insight into the past and foresight into the future. It is that little green piece that makes data useful in connected products. It is not the data itself. Data itself has no value whatsoever. And I think this approach think of this approach as speaking to the left brain and the right brain. You need to speak to the mind as well as you need to speak to the heart. When I tell people that I work on the Joule app, people will come up to me and tell me how much they like the app. That's pretty much the first thing that they tell me. And most of the reviews out there talk about the app and how much it is better than other solutions on the market. And if you look at the Joule app and a competitor app like Fitbit, you can almost see the difference matching the framework point by point. Fitbit is all about data, one straight row down. And for Joule is about living better. The product story is about living better. So for Joule, we actually translated the number of steps into progress to show you progress first, because that's our story. It also allows you to record your feeling, because it's about living better at the end. And we cap it by delivering insights about what you've done in the past and what you can do in the future to improve. So the takeaway here is that just being able to collect data doesn't mean you're making a useful product. You need to give data a purpose. You're going to have a lot of competition trying to do the same thing as well. So you need to give data a purpose in your product. And in order to integrate data into the product successfully and be useful in the long run, more importantly, you need to connect the meaning of the data with the story of your product and engage people both rationally and emotionally. Your ultimate goal is not about delivering data, it's about allowing people to look into the past and learn from it and be able to forecast the future and know what they need to do. And that's the whole point. So the third area that I have has come up with a lot in the design field, even in the past few years, is service design. And I worked like I said before, I work in a digital consultancy that is specialized in digital services. But even among seasoned designers, we debate about what service design is from time to time. So I want to bring that up, and I also want to highlight why it is important to IoT. So what is service design? This is the Wikipedia definition, and as usual, it's generic, long, and it's cryptic. But the bold-faced part is the important piece. Different from other kinds of design disciplines, service design is about orchestration. It's not about just crafting one thing, it's about connecting a bunch of things together to make it better and to deliver value. Why does service design matter for IoT? Well, the answer is actually quite simple. Every single company that makes IoT product will become a service design company. Every designer, every product manager, every developer who is working on an IoT product will need to do service design as well. Here's an example. Most of you probably have already seen this before. This before is the Nike Fuelband, no surprise. But what you probably have not seen is the device on the right. And that device is a $5 pedometer that you can buy from a discount store down on Market Street. They essentially tell you the same kind of information. They tell you how active you are on any given day. Neither of them track sleep, neither of them track food, neither of them track anything else. They just track activity. But curiously, the Fuelband costs 29 times more. So what people pay 29 times more is of course not because they give you the same information. It's not even because the Fuelband is a better piece of hardware. What people pay 29 times more for is the surface. The Nike Fuelband comes with the surface that takes this very ambiguous goal of being active and make it measurable, make it real time, and make it social. The hardware just happens to be an avatar of a multi-touch point surface that fits onto your wrist. And you see this in just about every single successful product. The net learning thermostat is not just a thermostat. It actually has a surface that helps you manage your energy efficiency. The tile, I'm not sure how many of you have seen this. Have any of you seen the tile? Perfect. So tile basically is a Bluetooth LED transmitter. So what you do is you get a bunch of them and you put you stick it onto things that you care about. And if it's in your proximity and you don't know where it is, you can use your phone to find it. But even more interesting, if this thing is, if what the object is actually lost, for example, you lost it in somewhere else, all the tiles that are deployed in the market will help look for your device. It is actually a distributed lost and found surface. And all the smart lock, same thing. It's not just a replacement of your key. It's actually a surface that allows you to remotely control who gets into your house and when and how often. Therefore, if you're designing an IoT product, you will need to do surface design. Okay, your next question is probably this. What's the difference between UX design and service design? Well, they're actually very different disciplines. User experience designers and service designers very often work with each other, but they do very, very different things. If you are a user experience designer and I ask you a task to do a mobile banking app, you'll probably create something like this, this is a very classic and typical task flow. You take the perspective of the user, you break the task down into steps, and you optimize that task. And more likely than not, each of these bubbles will translate into a screen or a state of a screen. But if you're a service designer designing a mobile banking surface, what you create is a lot of artifacts like this. This is called the customer journey. You don't take the perspective of one person. You take the perspective of all the people that is involved in this surface. You don't optimize for the task. You actually optimize for the orchestration of all these touch points as the person, in this case, the customer at the top, flows through the entire system. You also need to take into the viewpoints of different teams across your organization. In this case, you need to take into the considerations of your IT team who looks after your email system, the design team who may be working on the mobile app, and your customer support team who may be on the phone, and your supervisor teams who may be sitting somewhere else. The takeaway here is that all IoT product is an avatar for a surface. That's where the value of IoT products are. And if you are thinking about, or you're planning to, or you're already doing a IoT product, you will need to learn about surface design. So the last area that I also find very interesting, and it is the area that I believe will open a lot of opportunities for us, is about identity. Specifically about how to design for identity in order to customize our environment. Since we have all these computers coming into our environment and sensing and giving us information and connecting to each other. The reason why I believe this is so powerful is because of the fact that, well, one, for a very practical reason, no one likes to remember passwords, and no one likes to fiddle with settings. Today, we tolerate it. We use password as a proxy to port our identity and customizations from one place to another. Today, platforms like Google Login and Facebook Login makes it easy for us to port our contacts and customizations across surfaces. Tomorrow, our phone, and you already start to see it happens with the Touch ID on Apple. Objects on us, even our biometrics, will be used to customize experience in our physical space. Just think about it. No more onboarding flow to design to make. How amazing is that going to be? This is a great example. This is a very good example of how people's identity can be used to make a service better. In 2008, a new kind of secret vending machine was deployed in Japan. Most of them are very much like this one. Has anybody of you been in Japan and seen a vending machine like very much like this one? Fantastic. So the way it works is that when you stand in front of this cigarette vending machine and you put in the money, you need to hold down that white button that is at the lower right-hand corner for about 2 seconds. And what that does during that 2 seconds is that the machine takes a photo of your face, and then based on your bone structure and the wrinkle pattern on your face, it decides whether you are a minor. And if it believes you are a minor, it returns the money to you. And this is the kind of experience, the design that I'm thinking about, this kind of system that I'm thinking about. It takes a piece of information about your identity, and in this case, it doesn't even store it anywhere, but customize the experience to meet your needs, and in this case, well, the government's needs. In 2013, Disney deployed one of the most elaborate experience customization system in the world, called this Magic Band. When you book a trip to the Disney resort, they will send you these rubber bands with RFID inside, very much like the one on the upper left-hand side. When you plan your band is linked to your reservation. And as you plan your trip, everything is stored in the cloud and linked to your band. And when you arrive at the resort, you can unlock doors using your band. You can pay for purchases. You can check into your rides using your band. That by itself is actually quite cool. But just by having this device and connectivity actually opens up a whole new range of opportunities for Disney. And what they're planning to do is actually quite magical, coincidentally. If a kid is wearing a magic band and it walks towards a character, the character can actually address the kid by the name. In effect, the kid is no longer a visitor to the theme park. The theme park actually knows the kid. And if a bunch of people walk into the restaurant, it can tell whose birthday it is within the crowd before you sit down. And it's even stretching farther into the future, what they're planning to do, and this is based on an interview that I've read in my research, that they're even planning to stretch it far enough that if you have taken a ride before, it'll remember that you have taken a ride and make it slightly different next time you go through the ride. And I believe this kind of customization is so powerful and is now coming into our reality. Now this is of course an elephant in the room, and this is probably what you're thinking about: privacy. Well, first of all, as you probably can tell, I'm not a lawyer, and I cannot give legal advice. But in my opinion, as somebody who has been working on this for a while, I believe if we think about designing services and make design decisions solely on the ground around privacy, we may be going about it the wrong way. When it comes to services, I think of privacy as one side of the balance. It's not just one thing. It's actually one side of the balance. Value and transparency sits on the other side. So as long as you can communicate the value of having people's information, why am I collecting this? And I'm transparent about how your information is going to be used, how it's going to be handled, and what I'm planning to do when things go wrong. Privacy is actually often not an issue. If privacy is such an issue, and privacy is something that only thing that people think about, Facebook would have never been so successful. And many of us would have stopped using credit cards a long time ago, if you know what I mean. Designing for identity is by far one of the most exciting areas in designing for Internet of Things. It will allow us to tailor user experience in a way that we have never been able to do before in physical environments. Think about Amazon-like shopping experience in shopping malls and retail stores. Privacy, second point is privacy is not a single variable, it's actually a counterbalance to how you communicate the value of your service and how you communicate how you handle people's data and identity. So I'm very excited to be working on IoT products. Like I said, I've been working on this for about 4 years now. And I hope I answered some of the questions that you have about this new field. Before I leave with you, I want to have a few parting thoughts that I want to share with you. I believe we're now crossing into the fourth era of information access. From the mainframe era in the 70s, to the PC and internet eras in the 80s and the 90s, and to the mobile era after we crossed the millennium. Every time we cross from one era to another, user experience design, product design, and system architecture goes through a fundamental and tectonic shift. An IoT movement is going to present many new blue ocean activities, opportunities for many companies, and new areas for us to explore. But as we go and bravely explore these new territories, I would like to propose a few things. First, if we think designing for these new devices of different shapes and sizes are confusing, put yourself in the consumer's shoes. We need to help them create some sense of normalcy as we start to see this connected, that coming into the home. And we should make an effort to create things that are beautiful, that beautifully fit into the environment, not just to create something and fit into things that they already own. I believe connected products will be not just bought, but they will need to be invited because of what people already have and the ecosystem they have already invested in. So we should make an effort to make sure that it fits into what they already have. And the second point is related. And I'll show you an example a bit later. I believe it's important for us to look for problems that people already have and try to make it better. And we should not create things just because we can create it and rely on people to find the problems to solve with them. This is what I mean. The same company that makes the Navistech at the beginning of this presentation, for some of you who have missed it, is a connected toy that looks like a rabbit. They recently announced a product, and I think by now they are starting pre-sale already. It's called the Mother. And the kit comes with a console called the Mother in the middle of the white thing there, and a bunch of sensors that they call the cookies. That you can stick the cookies into just about anything at all. It's just a bunch of sensors inside. It is a solution that is not targeted. It is a solution that is not complete. And it's a solution that creates a very strange artifacts and introduces a very strange things into people's home. If you think I don't need a new Mother, well, it gets better. One sample use case that they have advertised is that you can bug your child's toothbrush, so you can track the movement of his toothbrushing and see whether he is brushing his teeth. Well, I don't think children need this kind of thing, and children who actually don't like brushing their teeth, they don't need a sensor on the toothbrush. They actually need better parenting, in my opinion. And they need to understand the long-term benefits of oral hygiene. And last but not least, especially if you're a designer, please don't design to make a concept video. And that's kind of a little pet peeve of mine. Every time I see a concept video on YouTube and on Vimeo, my eyes just kind of glaze over. I don't have any problem with of videos as a way to inspire people and capture people's imagination. But I do feel disappointed from time to time that they have not become a waypoint, but a destination for a lot of projects. User experience design and connected products is now leaving the rectangular screens. And you can no longer sit in front of your desk, make a video, and hope that you'll learn the future from your desk. A lot of tools that will allow us to make prototypes are now becoming available. I really believe if you are invested into the IoT space, you should go learn Arduino, you should go learn V3, you should go make friends with industrial designers and engineers. And trust me, and I've seen this over and over again for me and also for people who I work with, once you can feel your solution in your hands and you can see live data throwing fluid, your thinking, your perception, your understanding, and ultimately your product will become a lot richer. Thank you so much for coming today, and thank you so much for your time. So I believe we have about 10 minutes or so. If you have any questions, please come.
I was just going to ask, how do you handle errors?
Great question. I think errors is probably one of the few areas that we can carry over from mobile to Internet of Things. Meaning, the way we design for try to avoid errors from the beginning without prompting the user as much as possible, and try to prompt the user when the error occurs. Those are the things that we're still, I think, is pretty portable in IoT space. I think the trickier part about designing for error is actually designing for people's intention. For example, if I know you bought the drawable up because you want to manage your health condition, versus if you're the next person who buys it because he wants to lose weight, your intention is very different. And because of that, the error condition differs from person to person. Now there's system level error that you can pretty much address just using blanket strategies, like and try to alert them a little bit later and send them information and maybe even do graceful degradation in the experience. But the trickiest part, in my opinion, to capture error is to actually understand why the people buy a product in the first place. If I am, for example, if I am trying to lose weight, an error for me may not mean an error to the next person, but how do you tailor it? It's part of the onboarding, the exercise that I think a lot of the product will need to start doing, especially when you start with zero data. I don't know why you buy this product, I don't know your habit. If you really want to live in a very cold house, and you deliberately set the learning thermostat into a setting that's lower than what I recommend, is that an error? I think those are the things that we need to start confronting.
Similar to that question, I'm curious about what an insight is. So you were saying in your example with Jawbone, the insight was work out more, which, and that was just the one thing, the eye on the screen.
Correct.
So I love the idea of going from data, which is just quantified noise, to something that's an insight, but I feel like the question of what's an insight is really complex. So how do you start to answer that? And it varies for like the different use cases in this case.
And I think one of the reasons why data scientists has become such a hot commodity is because of that. We have massive amount of data. And in order to make sense of it, in order to just even do very simple stuff to highlight trends, it's difficult once you get into the individual level. However, one thing that I found to be effective is to do actually segmentation of your user. Understand the groups of people who buy your product, and then tailor the strategy of composing insights based on some of the segmentations that you know. For example, if I know a person who buys my learning thermostat is very much about controlling. I want to know exactly when I leave the house, exactly when the temperature drops off, and how much time it comes back to my desired level, versus somebody who just wants to save money. I don't care how, you just adjust it and make save money for me. The way you mine the data becomes very different. The strategy for you to approach it is very different. It's by framing the problem a little bit tighter. It will allow you to both feasibly and meaningfully compose insights for people. I think one of the things that I also believe, another occupation that I also believe will become a very highly desired commodity is copywriters. The people who can find the right tone of voice, match up with the right data, and deliver like sentences that I can actually read instead of chunks of graphs will be very powerful. And I think it's the combination of both when you can create something that is actually meaningful for people. And one more thing I want to just leave with you about insights is that insight, if it's generic, it has close to no value. If I just tell you if it's exactly what you said, if all Jawbone up does, and I can tell you that it's not, all it tells you is to walk more, no one would care. I find interest on the first time, but by third week, I'm like, okay, walk more. What does that mean? It needs to tell me that you walk the least on a Wednesday, and you have a window between 3 to 4 because you have no meeting. You may want to go out and take a jog. Does it make sense? Awesome.
So you discussed a bunch of ways of communicating and also like dealing with objects that are like basically consumer objects or that communicate like ambient or like non-physical information. Do you think that user experience within the Internet of Things space changes radically when we're talking about like say urgent information or like the devices or business critical, mission critical like user experience systems? And how would it change so?
That's a great question. I think that if you take a look at the whole IoT landscape, it actually bifurcates exactly along the line of what you just talked about. At the consumer side, there's these like discrete objects that people pick up and just wear it, and most of them don't really work with each other. And then there's this massive network, a massive infrastructure that's already been built, and now people are planning to build things on top of it. When you think about agriculture, when you think about traffic, when you think about water supply, they approach the problem of we already have these things deployed, they already kind of talk to each other, how can we measure more, measure smarter, and allow us to make better decisions. They, I believe, will continue to run a very, very different path. The reason is because the amount of money and the level of decision making that the industrial side needs to make versus the consumer side will be completely different. The industrial side will be very much about efficiency, cost saving, reliability, 24/7 reliability, around the clock. Measure fast side will run in a very, very different course because most of the consumers, even with big brands like Apple and Samsung, most of us as end consumers is still trying to grapple, well, should I buy a $500 watch that I don't quite know what I'm going to do with it yet? Should I upgrade my thermostat that's been working for like 15 years? Now I need to unplug it and plug it to something else. Like companies on the consumer side is trying to find an elegant solution so consumers will adopt and invite these products in. Companies on the industrial side is trying to improve what they already have by injecting sensors into it. The incentive structure, the problem they're trying to solve is very, very different, even though they fall into the same landscape. John?
The Disney bands are especially interesting to me because there's so much associated with the identity of the person, including a certain degree of authentication. So with these wearables, I'm curious what your thoughts are on using these things. I mean, the Apple something is there that presumes you have a phone and a pretty deep processor. But with a lot of wearable devices, you don't have that option. What are your thoughts on identity and authentication? The Disney thing is kind of overloading that.
Correct. I think the Disney band uses a very reliable and low-cost proxy for identity. It's actually not your identity, it's just a number. It just happens to embed into the band. I believe when there are enough sensors, every single individual can be identified uniquely. I believe what it comes down to is, one, whether companies are there to connect the dots, and two, as individual, whether we ask them to articulate the value of having all this data. I think that is the tension that we need to resolve. And a very well-known example about data is the Target example. The husband learns about the wife's pregnancy before he was told. It's about this kind of data. When you have enough data out there, we can actually, if you are really precise in where you want to focus, you actually can find a lot of things. I think the challenge really is to have consumers to wrap it around a mind It's already been happening. It's been happening since the 70s, when big department stores collect our ledger with our credit card. They already know exactly what we buy. You can actually go into a website and type in a zip code. It can tell you, it can give you a generic profile of who lives there and what they like and what their psychographic behavior is. I think it's just a continuation of that kind of awareness and insights as more and more sensors come into our environment.
Can you comment on bridging the gap between physical objects people are used to, like a thermostat or a dial, a light switch, an oven, and then projecting that on a rectangular space like a computer or phone or something?
Yeah. Actually, I quoted one of my, I would say, my hero in the industry, David Rose, and then he recently actually released a book called Enchanted Objects. And if you have not read it, and I highly recommend you to read it. And in the book, at the beginning of the book, he actually predicted 4 megatrends. One of them is, the first one is the world that we live in today. It's called the terminal world, when everything that is in all the sensors, all the connected objects, project itself onto the rectangular screen. That is a byproduct of LCD panel manufacturers, and that's a byproduct of computer makers who already know how to make computers, and they're just making it in different form factors. I believe that world will exist and still exist for a long time, because when you think about the fourth era that I showed you, it takes about 10-15 years for us to move from one chunk to another. And we are still very much in that mobile era, and I would say it probably will take us another 5 to 10 before we move into the next world where everything is now in our environment and not on us, and I don't need to look at my phone and look at everything. But the challenge actually is, what is that right form factor? If Google Glass is so obtrusive, and if computer screen is so big, and I don't want to implant something on my brain, what is that interface? What is that screen that allows us to uptake information? I actually see a lot of interesting things happening on the audio end. If you look at the Moto Hints that just got released, it's a Bluetooth headset that is no bigger than the thumb, this segment of the thumb. It's meant to be left in your ear. Think about the movie Her. You always have this interface with the world and all the sensors around you just by putting this thing into your head. I think with that kind of new device that allows us to kind of plug in, that will move us away from this terminal world. Right now, it's still too early. Cool. Thank you so much for your time.